Once upon a time, I covered what my comment section told me was the fastest racer on the N64, Extreme G, and honestly, I had nothing but good things to say about it. The game is fast, it controls well, there's a strong variety in both vehicle selection and weapons you can pick up during your races, and the tracks were all quite fun to race through. But today, we'll be looking at the sequel to this outstanding game, Extreme G 2. Now I'm sure with the title and thumbnail of this video, you're probably expecting this review to be full of bad news, but that's not at all the case. We'll get into why I don't think it's as good as the first game later, but first let me gush about all the things this game does right. Extreme G 2 comes with all the great features from the first game and expands on them quite well. We've got the same formula of different cups to race through, offering more and more tracks as you go from Atomic to Critical Mass to Meltdown, and each track still has these secret little paths that open up the harder difficulty that you choose. There's a decent bit of challenge to be found in moving from easy to hard mode, and there are no repeat courses from the first game, making this one feel completely fresh. In fact, to add to this freshness, we even have a new unlockable game mode called Duel, where you face off one-on-one versus a computer player of your choice of difficulty, making for more of a competitive, less chaotic racing experience. Aside from the modes, let's talk about the racing. Firstly, we have a better variance in vehicles to pick from this time around. In the first game, I really gravitated toward one vehicle specifically and used it pretty much the whole time, but especially because we can see each of these vehicles' stats laid out so nicely in this game, I ended up finding a good level of comfort with a ton of different ones this time around. We've got good choices for high top speed, acceleration, handling, shield power, and weapon power, and I just think this goes over a lot better in Extreme G2 than it did in the first one. To add to these vehicles in another brand new way from the way they worked in the first game, we also have a different style of default weapon on these bikes. Now instead of having a regular gun that maybe fires at different speeds depending on the vehicle you choose, we also have the option of charging our shot to whichever charge level you have time to get in order to fire a shot that slows down your opponents more than your regular blaster and can even bounce off the walls. This change had me using my regular gun a lot more in this game than the last one because it felt really unique and interesting compared to just holding down a button and hoping you hit the guy ahead of you. The vehicles in this game feel quite good to me, and much better than the first game's vehicles did at that. But with all of these upsides in the gameplay and slight improvements to the first game that I've personally found, there are of course a few things that keep this game from being as fun as the first one to me overall. Unfortunately, the problems I have with this game all have to do with the actual racing, even if the options surrounding the races have been done quite well. So in Extreme G, the drift button was more of a lean harder into your turn button than an actual sliding drift like most racing games would have it, and I thought that worked really well for the style of fast racing that we were set to do. But in Extreme G2, it seems like they moved more towards a sliding drift, and I don't think that works as well towards helping the player through these courses. If you just tap the button for a moment, you will be able to achieve the slightly sharper turning adjustments you were able to in the first game, but if there's a longer turn that you need to hold the button down for, it feels completely different to the way it used to be, and I personally don't prefer it. It's already pretty hard to see what's coming up next in the series of turns you'll be running through, and because of that, I'd rather not have a sliding drift over a sharper turning option. It just seems to introduce a large window of opportunity to lose speed where you wouldn't have with the previous game's system. On top of this change, this game also doesn't really feel as fast as the first one. I remember playing the first game for the first time and I was amazed at how quick it felt and how controllable it was even in the speed, but in this game I seem to reach max speed and I still feel like I'm cruising. Maybe this feeling is due to some combination of factors I wasn't able to pinpoint, but it really doesn't give me the same feeling of speed that the first game did, and I was a little disappointed to find that out. Feeling slower, however, shouldn't be much of a problem as the courses in this game are brutal. The starting courses aren't so bad, but even in the second cup, Critical Mass, things start to get really crazy really fast, and if you're jumping into these courses for the first time, you're gonna realize that you have a lot of learning to do before you're gonna be able to drive them well. Extreme G1 did have stages like this, but for the majority of them I was able to identify something and react to it in the laps after I first saw it. In this game, I feel like there were just some turns that were placed in a spot where you couldn't have possibly seen them coming, and it felt like a really sharp learning curve to me compared to how naturally I improved at driving in the first game. The final course in this game even has a jump that shows up 2 times throughout the course where you need to drive this loop in the track and then make this gap to continue. But if you don't make the gap, you will be respawned to a spot before the loop that you just did and lose a massive amount of time because of it. The courses in this game can definitely be quite brutal at times. I will say the creative direction for these courses has been improved quite a bit, both in presentation and some of the ideas that they decided to go for, but because of these grand ideas, the N64 lags more while playing them than the first game already did. The first game was quite playable, even through its laggy moments, but this game becomes a lot harder in certain tracks because of it. On top of all the complaints that I have with this game, there is one more that stands out to me above the rest, and that is the way the bike reacts when you land land on the ground with anything worse than a perfect landing. For some reason, so many times throughout any given course, I would find that my bike just flips around backwards and cuts all of my speed to zero. This seems like a brand new system to the game to punish you for not driving well and hitting walls, making the walls a bit more dangerous than they used to be, and I can see it being a decent idea to try to raise the skill ceiling in the series, but somehow it happens in way more places than just touching walls. Sometimes I'm just going too fast using my boost and then coming over a hill flips me right around, and I don't know if a good way to avoid it rather than just not using my boosts, I guess. But one of the things I liked most about Extreme G1 was that you were able to use risky boosts and catch up to the competition as long as you were able to control your vehicle through it well enough. I think whatever this new physics system with the bikes was meant to achieve fails here, and it kinda makes this game really frustrating at certain times. I do think there is a ton of fun to be had with Extreme G2, and I still largely enjoyed my experience playing through it, but all of these things I've mentioned against the enjoyment of the game today are very present throughout it, and especially compared to the joyride that I was having learning the first game, I can't help but think that this one fails to achieve everything that their first game did. If you are for some reason in the market for a great racing game on the N64, I would recommend Extreme G1. And if you'd like to know more about it, I have a video that should be popping up right about now that goes over it in its entirety that you can watch now that this video is over. If you're interested in seeing my other romps through N64 games, there's also a playlist full of them here that you can click on as well. Like and subscribe and all that if you'd like to stay up to date with me and my retro games, as I do post a new video every single Friday, but as for this week, that's my time. My name is Myloe, and I'm out.